What do you do when you discover someone else has already published an idea that you've been developing for months or even years? How do you recover when a project that once felt groundbreaking suddenly feels redundant? Hey, co-authors. In this episode, we tackle one of the most discouraging experiences in academic life, discovering that someone else has published on something that you thought was your idea. For many scholars, this moment triggers disappointment, self-doubt, fears that their work no longer matters. But the reality is that this experience is a normal consequence of participating in an active scholarly conversation. So let's dive in. I think that just about anyone who has been writing for a while has had this experience. You have an idea, you've been talking to other folks about it. They're all like, that's a cool idea. You really should do that. That's going to be some groundbreaking work there. You think that you've read all the literature, you're doing all the work, and then you get about 6 months, 8 months, 12 months into it, and then it happens, right? You hit that article that you're like, oh, dang it, man. This is what I was wanting to do. This is exactly the idea. This is exactly the design. This is exactly the literature review or the theory. And you're just like, dude, how did I not run across this article before now? And at first, whenever you have this realization, you feel really, really bad because you've put in all of this work, you put in all this time, and you thought that you were on the cutting edge. And here you are, someone's scooped your idea. So the good news is that you might still be on the cutting edge of your field. So just because you've landed on this article that addresses the thing that you've been interested in, that does not mean that all this work that you've done is in vain. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the reasons why this problem happens, and then some ways that you can pick yourself up off the floor, put yourself back together, and get on with your works. That way you can get it published. Okay, so let's dive in. Are you interested in mastering scholarly writing, developing productivity, and increasing impact, all while staying healthy? Then welcome to the Publishing Academic Research Podcast. My name is Dr. Kyle Ruddick, and I'm a full professor and writing coach who's dedicated to making sure you break through whatever is stopping you from reaching your scholarly goals. I meet so many scholars who have creative, innovative, and daring ideas, but can never seem to get those projects from proposals to print. I want you to get your work in the hands of people who will read it and appreciate it. So let's get into this week's big idea. So before I get into the specific problems that usually animate this issue, I want to start off by just saying that, the good news is that if you have an idea and then you find someone has recently published on that idea, that means that you are most likely sitting on the cutting edge of your field and that you're doing work that is interesting and important and is still publishable. Now, if you, on the other hand, if you're like, oh, I had this really cool idea, and then you find this article from 40 years ago that did it, okay, well then, sorry, my dude, maybe you just missed this one whenever you were doing your literature review, and that sucks because the literature has not only done this, but then has been built up off the thing, right? So unless you're going to say, hey, this thing that happened 40 years ago was done erroneously or had some other problem with it that you're going to be rectifying, in that case, it was done that long ago, you're probably just toast. But for the most part, that's not what's happening, right? You're looking through and something's been published in the past 1, 2, 3 years, maybe even just came out while you were doing your literature review. And again, all of this is an indicator that you're on the right track and that this problem that you have really isn't as big of a problem as you think. But let's talk about some of the reasons why this can happen. So first off, there's just more literature out there than you can possibly read, right? I mean, if you think, I've talked about this in other episodes, but if you think about how many journals there are today, as opposed to how many there were even 10 years ago, but certainly 20 or 30 years ago, there's just so much stuff that's out there. And so unless you are sort of artificially limiting your search to certain types of journals or a certain caliber of journal, there's a good likelihood that someone has done something that's what you've thought of or is very similar to it, because other people, just like you, are reading the literature and then building off that foundation. And so that's naturally going to move people in a certain direction. There's just so much out there. There's so many journals, book chapters, handbooks, just so much stuff out there that at this point, it's hard to review it all in a time frame that allows you then to publish with some regularity. At some point in time, you have to just stop reading. So there's a chance that 6 months from now, you're going to read something and go, oh crap, someone published on this, a year or two ago. How did I not see this? Right? So that's the first thing. The second reason that this happens is because, again, ideas in research are based on what has come before. And a lot of that is even spelled out in the future directions portion of a manuscript. And so the idea that you will come to an idea for your research that is unique, that no one else has thought about, and that no one else will think about or could think about, that's unlikely, because just the way that scholarship proceeds, it's always narrowing down what people are thinking about. As we test an idea and we go, okay, that's a good idea, we can build on that. There's this other idea, that's a bad idea. We're not going to continue to research that. Okay, well, now we've gone down from 2 ideas that are possible to 1 idea. And so if we build off that one good idea, or however many there are in your field, then there is, just by the nature of that, a limiting and finite amount of pathways that someone can proceed in the literature. And so as a result, these ideas emerge in sort of clusters because they're all connected on some level. They're articulating all of these different nodes, which are these different research articles and chapters and textbooks. So as a result, then, as your field evolves, all that scholarship is evolving in this collective way. And so it makes perfect sense then that other people are going to have very similar or maybe even the exact same idea that you had. The third thing is that a lot of people, I would say, overestimate how original they are as thinkers, right? I encounter this a lot with students more than anyone. I'll teach a research methods class or I'll have a thesis and they'll come into my office and they'll just be so excited and ready to go. And, oh, I've got this great idea. It's so original. Like, no one's ever thought about it. I'm super into it. I'm so excited for it. And you're like, okay, well, how much literature have you actually read? Oh, well, I've read like a dozen things already. You're like, okay, that's cute. A dozen whole things, you say. But yeah, like most people, like they get an idea and they get so enamored with it and so excited by it that in some ways, not only do they not do their due diligence in reviewing the literature on their first or even their second go around because they're so excited for the idea that they're just trying to find things that will support the idea that they have. But sometimes that might even consciously or subconsciously lead you to not look at things that you should have looked at because you don't want to find that someone else has already published on this. And so there's, I think, just a little bit of overestimation about what it means to be original and how original an idea is. And I think a lot of that comes from this notion. I think this is particularly true of like doctoral students and early career faculty, which is to say that because what you've been reading in your doc program and probably closely, very soon thereafter, has usually been the touchstone foundational pieces of your field of study or research projects that are a part of your field of study, that you think that what you need to do is write in a way that has that type of impact and influence on your field. And so naturally then, any idea that you have that's big and cool and exciting to you must be the idea that is going to be big and exciting and world-changing for everyone else. But the truth of the matter is that there's so much research out there, and all that research is doing is incrementally confirming and extending from known knowledge to new knowledge. That the vast majority of scholarship is not revolutionary. It can't be, right? Like the idea that a field would have revolutionary insights every year, then that just means that we have really bad knowledge that's being replaced by other newer bad knowledge until what? I guess finally we find something good? No, right? Like good science, good scholarship proceeds incrementally. And yes, based on that incremental approach, eventually what will emerge is someone who has the insights to synthesize and analyze across all of that knowledge and to articulate something that pushes us to that next level. But that's incredibly rare. For most of us who are writing, what we're doing is providing the foundation for those types of insights by doing the often invisible but no less important work of incrementally building on past scholarship. Finally, closely aligned to the issue that I just talked about is there's a lot of emotional investment on the part of researchers, on the part of scholars who think that just because something is new and exciting to them, it must be new and exciting to everyone. And that is even more so whenever you've spent weeks or months or even years really getting into the weeds and trying to figure something out. And so finding that similar publication, it's really disheartening and it almost feels like a betrayal because you thought that there was this gap in the literature that perhaps is not there or is not quite as large or is not quite what you thought it was going to be. And so this can feel like a personal failing, right? I didn't read the literature enough or someone else took my idea, even though, they're from halfway across the globe. And there's no way that they could have ever known your idea other than for them to like steal it out of your head with an alien cosmic ray, right? Like it feels that way because you're just so invested into it. And so that can be really disheartening and really kind of take the wind out of your sails. But like I was saying before, the good news about this is that everything is not lost. There's probably something that's salvageable out of your project and that work is not wasted. Okay. So let's talk then a little bit about the solutions. So the first thing that I would say is that if someone else has published something that is very closely aligned or even the exact same sort of idea that you were trying to get out and they scoop you and they publish it before you, the first thing that you can do is think to yourself, how can I use this work as a springboard for my own work? Okay. So did they use the exact same theory? Did they use the exact same method? Did they use the exact same body of literature? If any of those things are different, then that in and of itself becomes a way for you to find publication. Now, are you going to be able to publish it in that exact journal? Probably not. Are you going to be able to publish it in just as good of a journal? Yeah, maybe. It depends on how robust your field is. It could be that you end up having to go to a second-tier journal rather than a first-tier journal if that's where you found this publication. But certainly publishing in a second-tier journal of your field is going to be way better than for you to not publish at all. So I think that what's important then is for you to think about how does this recent publication provide you the space for you to publish your work. The second thing, and aligned with that, is you should be identifying the gaps that their work didn't fill, because it is very unlikely that they did their research in the exact same way that you wanted to do yours. Even if they use the same theory and the same literature, it's very unlikely that they use the exact same method that you were thinking of. And again, even if they were, it's not the end of the world, but there's so many things, especially methodologically, that give you an entrance into this. What was their population or their sample? What context might they have ignored? Did they have a variable that you weren't thinking of? Or maybe you have a variable that they didn't think of? What sort of nuances did they flat? Did they overlook any design protocols? These are all things that you can take a look at in their literature and go, okay, if they didn't do everything exactly the way that I did it and exactly perfectly, that then becomes a way for you to address that through your work. Now, what I would encourage you not to do is to submit your paper and go, hey, author A published this work and it was crap. It was terrible. And so here I am, I'm going to swoop in and correct everything. I mean, if that was the case, then cool. But more likely it's not, since it got published in a journal. It's not crap and it's not terrible. And so instead, what you want to frame this as is more of a, here's how I'm building on their work rather than here's how I'm correcting their work. But if you can do this, then you can show how the gaps that they have left unaddressed or the contradictions that went unresolved are opportunities now for you to step in, to correct and extend that work and to move the needle a little bit in your field of study. The last thing that you should not do is ignore their work. I've had so many instances where scholars are like, oh yeah, I was going to write this thing, but then someone else wrote it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just not going to cite it and then hope that no one catches it. If someone does catch that you have not cited this work, then it looks doubly bad on you, right? It looks bad because you're not citing cutting edge scholarship, but then doubly bad because you're not citing scholarship that is directly related to what it is that you're trying to study. So at best, it makes you look like a fool. At worst, it makes you look like a petty jerk. Instead, what I would encourage you to do is very strategically work that into your literature review. Show how their work is positioned itself in the cluster of other scholarship of which it has emerged from, and then you can show how your work is addressing a similar but not the same research gap. And so you say things like building on this scholarship or building on this idea or extending the work of this research project or addressing the limitation of such and such research article, right? Using those types of phrases allows you to both address what's going on in your field while at the same time noting those differences, which is what makes your work important. I don't know about you, but I like watching cartoons. And one of my favorites is Futurama. And there's this one spot where like Hermes trying to get his license back to be a bureaucrat. And the chief bureaucrat says something like, you're technically correct, which is the best kind of correct. Much like that, academics, we like nuance in our differences. We are very happy and very comfortable in spaces where the difference is not a difference of kind, but a difference of degrees and a difference in nuance. And so if you think to yourself, oh, this is so similar to what I'm doing, no one will ever want to read it. I assure you that's not the case if what you've done different from what that other person has done is different enough to where it addresses and builds on some type of novel insight that we wouldn't have had otherwise. I think that this idea that everything that you have to do has to be absolutely new and absolutely novel and absolutely cutting edge, I don't think that exists, right? I can't tell you how many quote unquote big name scholars that I've met. And the old saying, never meet your heroes, absolutely applies. You've read their pieces in grad school and you're like, oh my God, this person just must be like a titan intellect. And then you meet them and you're like, oh, no, this is pretty normal. That one piece that they wrote was really cool and really did a lot of good for the field. But the pieces that they wrote before that, the pieces that they wrote after that, that's how it is if you're lucky for most of us, right? You get one really good piece in your career. Otherwise, most of the work that we do is a part of this incremental work, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that's going to about wrap it up for me. I just want to say again, before I stop here, that like the impact and the influence of your work, that lies in the contribution that you're making to your field and to the wider audience that you are trying to communicate to. That impact and that influence is not done in isolation. It's not done in self-aggrandizement. It's not done in ego. It is done in the quiet, nose to the grindstone, daily work that all of us are engaged in. And that if you take this tack, that every contribution that you have is not supposed to be this absolutely banger of a publication, but instead is a part of this larger conversation. And we've talked about this before, that this idea that we're engaged in a scholarly conversation with our peers whenever we're researching. Then in the same way that you would really hate it if you were in a conversation and someone kept trying to come up and like change the subject or like tried to one up everyone or like tried to be the most important person in every conversation that you were a part of, we would consider that person to be a jerk, ghost, self-aggrandizing, all those things. Then in the same way, like you can't approach your research life with that type of ethic either. Okay. I think that that's not only a better model for us in terms of our research and a more clear-eyed and more responsible look at what it is that we're trying to contribute, but also it just takes the pressure off of us. And it's just a healthier mindset to be in, that what we're doing here is not always trying to rock the foundations of our field, but instead we are engaged in a conversation where all of us are hopefully marching forward and articulating new knowledge that can help everyone live life a little bit better. So, like I said, sorry, got off on a tangent there. That's going to wrap it up for me. So again, as always, I appreciate you tuning in. If you're liking the podcast, I appreciate you throwing a 5-star review, subscribing, or writing something nice. If you're interested in me, maybe talking to your class or to your Center of Excellence of Teaching and Learning, or other types of ways that I can talk to you or other folks that are in your program that might benefit from this type of knowledge, reach out to me. My contact information's in the podcast description. And otherwise, I hope that you're having a fun, relaxing summer with a little bit of productivity on the side, but not too much. You're really taking time to take care of yourself. I'm, in fact, as you are listening to this, probably on a cruise ship with a very trashy novel that contains either dragons or spaceships in one hand, a plate stacked with pizza sitting next to me, and a beer in the other hand as I try to relax a little bit over the next few weeks. All these episodes are still going to be dropping on time every Tuesday, so no worries there, but I hope you're taking care of yourself and you're having a little bit of fun. Okay? Well, okay. So thank you so much, and I will see you in next week's episode. Hey, co-authors. What's stopping your best ideas from becoming your next big publication? Brilliant research shouldn't die in your drafts folder. Now's the time to bridge the gap between the possible and the published. You can support this podcast by subscribing to it, leaving a positive review, assigning it to your classes, or sharing it with a colleague. Let me know what I can do to make this the best podcast resource for you. And if you'd like to know more about my writing coach services, then you can find my information in the podcast description and set up an appointment. I'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, keep healthy, keep writing, and don't let Reviewer 2 get you down.